Hi, everyone. My name is Yanni Barrow, and I would like to thank you for listening in this podcast, this project. Today, I am introducing you to Michelle Humbert. Michelle is a doula, and she resides in Chicago. So, thank you, Michelle, for being here, and I'm super excited for us to talk about what you do.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to get into whatever we're talking about today.
That's cool. So, let's begin. The first set of questions I'll ask you is about your life as a doula. So, my question to you is, what made you want to become a doula?
I know I tell people this all the time. I should have a better answer to this. I really don't remember what got me interested in it. I feel like one day I saw it someplace, or I might have been reading something and I was like, well, that sounds really cool one day. And that was about like 7 years ago, right? Yeah, about 6 or 7 years ago. And prior to that, I guess this predates it. But when I was an undergrad, I was planning to be a pediatric nurse because I've always liked working. I always wanted to be like in a field that I help people, but I really loved hanging out with little babies. Growing up, all of my cousins are much older than me, so they started having kids between my ages of 10 and 16. So I was around a lot of babies all the time. So I was like, these kids are fun, and they don't really talk. So that's probably my favorite people to be around. But then I abandoned my nursing dreams, apparently, because I don't do well with math. But I abandoned those dreams, and then I ended up in social work. And then I still like doing medicalized treatment or being in a medical system because I feel like it's really easy for people to get taken advantage of, and you're probably your most vulnerable in that system. So I feel like I thrive better there. So I think a mix of like my interest medically, but still having some desire at times to still be a nurse, but not really a nurse. I don't want those responsibilities, but I love working with people who are pregnant, and I like hanging out with little babies. So I think it kind of mixed it all in together.
Right.
Because aside from just doing the doula stuff, me being a social worker kind of mixes into this too. But I think it really kind of came from multiple different directions. It wasn't just like one thing. I want to say 2020. I think that was in the beginning of the pandemic. I had attended a panel conversation for one of the sororities in New Haven when I was living there. And they had two doulas up there. I think it was Black Maternal Health Week that I was listening to. And I was just listening to what they do. And I was like, oh, and it reminded me of something I completely forgot about years beforehand. I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I think I should probably revisit that because it sounds like it's something that I would like to do. And just really thinking about how far I could take my social work degree and my interest and merge them, because I've always kind of been interested in merging the two of them. So I think it does all of that in one.
So I did notice that you did mention what you love about being a doula. You talked about the babies and I guess just the connection with working with the other Black women, I believe, as well. But I would like to know, were there any challenges that you did face so far?
I guess one of the biggest ones is kind of the one that I was most worried about was being in a hospital setting. Even though I work in a hospital setting by day, like being in this setting as a doula is a little different. I think usually OBGYNs have their own perspective of what doulas are and how they are. So that makes it a little hard when you have like you coming up against a narrative that all doulas act one way or all doulas are this particular way. Everybody has their own style, their own practice, their own function. They do what makes sense to their business. But then trying to like connect, the way I think about it in my philosophy is that like I want to partner with whoever is helping the person give birth. I don't care about trying to like I do care. I don't want to say that. I don't care about like that, like advocating in that way or coming in saying like, I'm trying to make sure my client is not going to die kind of thing. I don't want that to be the focus, because I think the biggest thing is that this person isn't sick. The person is having a baby, and the environment that they're having this baby in is already not in their home, right? So it's already a level of discomfort, so to speak, in that. So if I'm partnering with the providers and partnering with the people who are a part of this process, that makes it a little bit easier in my eyes. And then making sure that this person is still respected and maintains their dignity throughout the process. That means more to me than it does to kind of be like, oh no, we're not doing this. Like she said she didn't want to do that. I don't want to be argumentative, because I think you got to also remember that's a part of the space. and energy transfers in different areas. So I don't want the client to feel like they have to be like pincer because their team is not getting along or there's some discord there. Like that doesn't make sense to me unless it's necessary. Then yeah, but if it's not and I can find another way of still getting what I need, I'm gonna go the other way first before I have to take the route that might be more traveled for some people.
You did mention your values basically, and you talked about energy, and values are something that a lot of businesses also uphold their morals, their values, what do they care about in pertaining to customer service, all of that. So do you have your own business or do you work with other doulas, or maybe both? How does that work?
I do both. So here in Chicago, I mean, and across the country, I can imagine they still have them. There's a lot of agencies that are developed to help doulas get their roots in their hands on other people. And a lot of times I think the cost of doulas kind of changes. So that's when agencies come in for doulas to help and for families to kind of get more affordable services. And I work with an agency that I feel like aligns with my practice because I'm a birth doula, but I have this mental health and nutritional health focus that's a part of the business as well. The agency I work with also kind of focuses on like, okay, what do you need after you have birth? Not just the birth, but like they have physical therapists there, they have mental therapists there, postpartum doulas, lactation consultants, and so on. So they have like a whole little kind of plan to make sure that people are nested in that way. So that mattered to me that whoever I work with also has to have the same emphasis of like what matters to me. And I think that they're really I like the transparency that they have. In terms of me working with other doulas, I think is necessary for if you're a birth doula or any kind of like, technically we're not first responders, but we're kind of first responders in the way like we're here with the person who's experiencing seen as traumatic or could be seen as like a really happy time, right? I think it's essential that you have a community of people. So I have like a little doula community of people, whether they are new or like really seasoned doulas that offer insight, support, guides, like just ways of processing, ways to understand the not just the business, but the practice itself. And everybody has like a different level of insight around it. So it helps me kind of like not get too much in my own head about like, okay, do I know this? How do I do this differently? I want to do it like this person. So it is helpful to have it because it feels like it has definitely grounded me in the last year and a half of like really understanding what kind of business I want to run and how true to myself I'll still want to be at the same time. But the agencies are there definitely as like a backup for me more than it's the primary. Because I still take private clients that come directly to me for my business, and then some agency clients that are like third party.
How did you find your community as for doulas? Where did you meet them?
Usually I meet the other doulas at events. Sometimes there might be an event for not doulas. Well, yeah, sometimes there's events for doulas to kind of do a meet and greet. Volunteering events. There is a birth center that is going to be Black owned here. That's going to be in the South Side. So I met a lot of Black doulas and like my community people in that environment, and that's been great. Sometimes even if I'm just following somebody on Instagram and I think they're cool, I'm gonna just send them a DM and be like, "Hey, you want to go and get something? Like you want to get lunch, something like that." Because that's for me. If I don't have a community, I can't tell the clients I work with that they need the community, right? Like I need to be able to have something because I know I don't have everything. And I know that I still need to like partner with other people. So I think that aside from me even connecting with doulas, it's also extended to me making sure I connected with like the mental health providers in the area who specialize in perinatal mood disorders for pregnant people throughout like the spectrum from when they're giving birth and then to after. Even like physical therapists, but also pelvic floor therapists that help with any like, you don't have to have pain, but any experiences with the pelvic floor after birth and, so on, like all these other different people who do care for people who were pregnant or are in postpartum. So that makes a really good network for me, because then it's like, oh, well, if I don't know this, I can refer you to this person and they can do this with you, or I can look this up and connect with this person, develop this relationship, so that I can like funnel clients to them and they can funnel clients to me, right? So it creates this like nice seamless traction essentially for the business and myself.
All right, so now that we know about how you find your community of doulas and as for clients, how do you find your clients? Is it word of mouth? Is there application? How do you, this is very interesting for me to know.
There are, so what I actually have done that especially in the beginning, because it's really hard, it was really hard for me. I can't speak for everybody because everybody has a different experience with this. A lot of it is word of mouth. And for me, I didn't have a lot of traction in the area because I'm not from Chicago. So I'm still basically a transplant. So the people who know people here and already have a community, aside from doing doula work that serves them, I don't have that piece. So how I've gotten clients have been, yes, through word of mouth of people in my community, but mainly through a website that is kind of like Indeed, but for pregnant people looking for providers or looking for doulas in that way. So I have a membership to this place called Born Beer. And I've gotten a little bit of traction off of there, enough to keep the sustainability of the business. But I also think even having the agency adds an extra factor onto it, because that's how I get a lot of probably more consistent clients. But that website has been really, really helpful. A lot of the times I have gone up to just randomly pregnant people outside if I'm walking and like, hey, do you have a doula?
Oh, that's so great.
It's something that I was completely uncomfortable with until I kept having all these pregnant people passing by, and I'm like, should I give them a card? Like, how does this work? Right. And really just understanding like what's a line. And I already feel weird about kind of going up to people that I'm not 100% sure are pregnant, because I don't want to be offensive in any way. But if it's obvious to me that they are, then I'll be like, oh, okay, cool. Let me just have this comment. Let me see if they're like interested. And sometimes they just take the card and they might pass it along to their friends or someone else. There's people that I've done consultations with that have been like, I'm going to go with somebody else, but I have some friends that I can pass your information into. So it's kind of like it is a word of mouth business. I will say that. So it's easy to kind of the more visibility you have, the more clientele you can kind of get. I've also used Instagram for visibility purposes. Probably not as much as like trying to get clients, more than it is just to make sure that there's some visibility up here. And when I do want to take on more clients than what I am doing now. Because I think that's a good platform, but it's also sometimes it's hard for people to know how to use Instagram to find things other than people, right? Like there's definitely products and services up there, but it's not always used the same.
Okay. Wow, that's so cool. I didn't know that you would go up to people. That makes a lot of sense.
I would. It was very nerve-wracking.
So now our last question for this section is, what is your most memorable experience then?
My most memorable experience. One of my very first clients is a friend of mine, and helping her go through the process. So she had already had one child. He's now 5, but he was 4 when she had gotten pregnant. And her first pregnancy, she was so nervous about so many things and wanted everybody else to be comfortable, especially when she was at the hospital giving birth, that she kind of then felt uncomfortable and alone throughout the process. And she didn't want to repeat that. And she had a C-section for that first birth. And that was basically undesired. Most people don't want one. But for her, she was very much like, I really didn't want to do this. And I felt by myself. And it was just so many things. And I remember she specifically was like, I was being so nice to all the nurses just so that I wasn't getting mistreated because I was by myself. That she came across one nurse that just told her, like, you don't got to do that. Like, you're here. I'm here to help you, not the other way around. So that stuck with her. So when she got pregnant again, she definitely was like, I want to hire you as the doula. And then I really want to kind of learn and understand what's happening in this process. Cause I went through labor, but I had a C-section. So I don't know what's happening in the actual vaginal birth. And equally including her husband too. Cause I don't really like to exclude them. They're a part of the process as much as possible. They're a parent. They're here. They know things about this person that I don't know. In that situation, that's somewhat true because that's still her husband. She's my friend, but that's still her husband. There's something there that I don't have or that I don't know. So I think that's probably one of my most memorable ones because it was probably one of the first births I had and one of the more touching ones to see, okay, if I give this person this information and tell them how to do this and show them how to do this, they can kind of do this all on their own, whether they have me or not. And even seeing the difference in how her husband was able to kind of feel a little more present and confident from the first birth to the second was really, really nice, because it was like, okay, I know what I'm doing then, right? Like, as soon as I've told you this, this, and this is the first time I've actually practiced it. And I'm hearing the hospital staff, because it was a virtual birth because she lives in Connecticut. I'm hearing the hospital staff repeat things that I had already said. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, I do know what I'm doing. Cool, cool, cool. So it was pretty affirming for me, and I think that probably was my most memorable, because then as you kind of go through this, you kind of like, do I know what I know? Do I like know how to do this? Does this make sense? Like, maybe I don't know, right? You start doubting yourself through the process, until you actually kind of get into it and doing it. And I feel like that was probably the best experience so far.
So the first one is, what do you consider to be an excellent doula?
I think an excellent doula is a person that can really attend to their clients' needs, and you just really need to be an excellent listener. That's really all it is. Like, I don't think that you need to be like the person that knows all the skills in the world or need to be trained by the best person. No, I think you really just need to be a really good listener. And I would say, like, have a strong sense of empathy, because of course we have no idea even if you have been pregnant, you don't know what the other person really is feeling. You just know what that might feel like if that was you, right? Like, you can't really walk in the shoes, but you can like feel it with them. So it definitely is that. And I think that's it. I think you really just need to be an excellent listener and have like a good sense of empathy, because you're working with people in their lives, and it's a very vulnerable and new and transformative time. So just having that, like, be in that safe space in a way for the others.
Did you go to school to become a doula?
I did a training. It was an online self-paced training. I know some people have and some people haven't. One of the more popular programs is called Doula. They've been around for a long time and they've got a lot of traction. Depends on the donor teacher or instructor. They have weekend courses, and sometimes they're a little bit longer than a weekend. I did not feel that I would be the best me or best doula over a weekend. So I opted for a course, and this is the same course that my mentor that I had mentioned earlier took with Childbirth International, and their CBI for short. They offer a scholarship too for Black and brown folks. So that's another reason why I was like, well, if I don't have to pay full price, because it can get costly with all of these things. Like, everybody, all of it is a business. So if there's an opportunity to save some money and, you know, kind of have some equitable playing field, that's helpful. But I did their program specifically because it went over the anatomy of birth and all of like the medical piece of it, because I felt that's where I felt most insecure for myself. Like, I really wanted to know that. I didn't want to be in a hospital room and not know what they were talking about when it came to medical stuff. I don't like the feeling of that. And I know most people don't like the feeling like you're in a doctor's office and they're talking to you in their language and you don't know what they're saying.
Yeah.
And I think is, for me, and this is, again, other people may feel this way, but for me, that was more important than me learning how to like be present as a doula for the clients than anything. Because I feel like, well, if you don't know what's going on and I don't know what's going on, how am I actually helping you? So that was important to me. And they went over that, and I loved everything that they had in their program. It had a lot of resources in terms of like looking at things in very different perspectives and being really objective and neutral, and more than I am as a therapist. I think it helped me really like take it back a little bit more and widen the view around things, like really look at what research says versus what are moms saying, like what are people who are pregnant are saying, because research kind of can fall short at times, and when it does, what does that mean? And really learning how to like, okay, how do I navigate what research says, what this person says, and how I feel about it versus how the client feels about it. So I think that was a really good like learning curve, but also just great training altogether.
it seems like you don't have to go to college in order to be a doula.
I don't think that you don't really necessarily need a degree for it either. If you have a nursing degree, that might give you a lot of like helpful background on like how to deal with the body and what the body is doing in medication and different things like that. If you have a degree that's like more on the human service, liberal arts area, kind of like myself with social work, that gives you the skills of being able to relate to people. So I think anything that's related to medical and kind of communication or dealing with people in underprivileged or anything like that will give you a lot of insight. I mean, maybe even somebody is majoring in business, this could be helpful to know, right? Because you've got to build the business. So I don't think if anybody has any degree that it wouldn't help them, right? Because that's one area, even that I just said it. Being a doula is one thing, but being a doula and having a business is a different thing, because none of these doula programs, except mine did go over it, but not all of them go over like, well, how do you build this business now? Like, what do you do? So even if you are in business school or you have some accounting or whatever information, that still serve the business and how you want to like deal with it and take it far. Because I think that's where a lot of doulas kind of get a little funky, because they want to help people, but the business side sometimes can suffer. And the way we kind of look at our services is like, well, a lot of people really can't afford the true cost, so maybe we lower it, or maybe we do this, right? So really just kind of looking at it again, kind of objectively, like what do you need to live? But I think any degree definitely will. I don't think of a degree that I can't think of a degree that wouldn't serve a good purpose.
Okay. So for someone that's interested in becoming a doula, what's the first step that you recommend for them to take?
I would encourage them